everyone, welcome to Trend Talks. Today I have the pleasure to talk with Vishal Shah. He has a 15-year financial track record at Lehman, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, and mostly focused on renewable energy. And one of the things he's currently focusing on is venture capital and private equity in a topic of green hydrogen. And that's what we're going to talk today about. He's a regular visionary speaker at our Solar Plaza conferences. He will also be speaking at our upcoming virtual edition of the Green Hydrogen Future. Welcome, Vishal.
Thank you, Edwin. Nice to have you. Nice to be speaking with you.
So, Vishal, if you look at what's all happening around this COVID crisis, economic crisis, what is your perspective on the future of green hydrogen?
Well, I think the one thing that has come out very clearly from the stimulus packages that have been announced by most major governments globally, they've all started promoting green energy. And as part of that, clean hydrogen is certainly something that is a big focus for most governments. So I think that the future has become stronger, brighter. I think that the government push in the sector, particularly in Europe, as well as in parts of the world and including in the US, has actually increased. We are seeing more specific policies announced recently around supporting green hydrogen, so that's great. At the same time, we are also starting to see the interest in the sector from public and private investors. So you saw the successful transactions that have happened recently in the commercial vehicle space of large companies in the US, and that just shows the interest that ESG investors have in this space. And so, we think that momentum in the green hydrogen space is going to help a lot of the other companies as well.
And so you also see this increasing interest of green hydrogen in the US?
Absolutely, yes. So we actually have a couple of projects going on. I mean, there are a few things that have happened. One is the government, the US Department of Energy announced a $100 million grant specifically for electrolyzer technologies and fuel cell technologies in heavy-duty transportation, and that happened just about a week ago. And so that again speaks of the policy support that green hydrogen sector is seeing in this COVID crisis. Secondly, we are seeing some specific project announcements in the US, large utility projects that are starting to think about green hydrogen supply chain. Quite frankly, actually, even somewhat sooner than most of the other large projects announced globally. So we think that the US is actually looking pretty good from a green hydrogen supply standpoint. And the last thing I would say is the amount of capacity build out in renewable energy that has happened both here in the US as well as in Europe and other parts of the world. That itself should drive a lot of the growth in the green hydrogen sector as developers try to understand and they appreciate the additional value that can be captured from the green hydrogen space, as opposed to selling electrons to utility companies at a very, very low price.
So if most of our viewers have a background in the solar industry, what would you say is will be the impact of this green hydrogen topic for the solar industry?
Oh, I think it's going to be a huge game changer for a couple of reasons. First, I think the cost curve for electrolyzer technologies has come down quite significantly, especially if you think about the low-cost technologies that are coming out of the US as well as Asia, including China, alkaline as well as PEM electrolyzers. So you see the sort of cost curve that we saw in solar, for example, right? And that is not even before the scale aspect is really taken up. So if you take the low-cost electrolyzers and the low-cost renewable power that is being developed, you can actually produce green hydrogen competitively in most parts of the world, especially where solar resources are pretty good. So then if you consider the offtake of the green hydrogen sector when it comes to heavy-duty transportation, some of the other decarbonization initiatives that are taken off by some of the large industrial companies, there is a natural demand for some of these products, unlike in the case of solar or wind technologies, where today a lot of the PPAs are hard to come along. So you have to develop a solar project and hope that you can sell it in the merchant market. Over here, on the other hand, in the case of green hydrogen, you can actually find an off-taker that can sign a 15-20-year contract. Maybe in some cases, with the help of incentives, you can actually generate a much better return on your project investment than selling in the merchant.
Yeah. So do you think that we will see green hydrogen driving the solar industry on a short term, or are we talking a couple of years from now?
I think it's going to start now. And the way it ramps up will be a function of a couple of things. I think it's going to be a function of how developers, view the opportunity, how many developers get interested, what the end market development looks like, with the recent IPO of Nikola and their plans to develop green hydrogen infrastructure along the US highway, I think you are starting to see more hydrogen demand taking off in many parts of the world. So as developers see the national demand and as technologies become available to ship hydrogen, say from Texas to say Utah, or from one part or the other, I think it's going to be easier for developers to start integrating hydrogen in their business plan. So my guess is that it's going to be a slow start in 2020, 2021. And then from there, I think, globally, particularly, I think you're going to see a massive uptake, in the next 2 to 3 year time.
Now, you, of course, have all this experience also in the PV industry, so you have seen these curves ramping up. So are you more bullish on green hydrogen than you were in the past on PV?
Oh, I still have my projections on the solar industry back when we first came out in 2004, and we were one of the most bullish on the street when it came to demand projections for solar. And we were very bullish, and we called for grid parity maybe in a certain time frame. What turned out in solar was, we ended up growing the market, significantly faster and bigger than what we were initially projecting. In the case of green hydrogen, I think our view is that this sector is 10 times bigger than solar, because you don't only have power generation, but you have transportation, industrials, a lot of end markets that can be addressed. Let's put it this way, right? If the world has to decarbonize by a certain time frame, say 2050 time frame, solar and wind today only address, including EVs, for example, only address a third of the decarbonization problem. So if you look at the emissions that are coming out, only a third of the emissions have been addressed by these technologies. 2/3 of the emissions can be addressed by a clean molecule like hydrogen. So we think that the uptake of hydrogen is going to be significantly larger than the renewables, including PV. And I think if you look at the policies and the supply growth that we are seeing, it's going to be faster as well. So
what do you see as the major challenges for this development?
Well, I think first of all, so our view is there are two major bottlenecks, and that's where we are focused on: technology and finance, right? So we need to bring the right set of technologies to the market. So it's unlike PV, where you really have to think about only the solar PV cost. Over here, you don't really have to think about the cost of producing green hydrogen, which has to be competitive with, say, natural gas-based hydrogen, which is somewhere in the $1 to $2 per kilogram range. But then how do you ship hydrogen from point A to point B? How do you store it? How do you think about developing the hydrogen infrastructure, which is competitive with the cost of the gas at the pump? So I think those technologies are coming along. The Department of Energy in the US spends about they've spent so far about $2 billion in developing these technologies. They have about 1,000 different technology in the portfolio, and about 100 of those technologies are near commercial or already commercial. So I think we are spending a lot of time in bringing those technologies to commercialization. We think that's something that's happening much faster again. If you look at the transactions that have happened in the private markets over the last 18 months, hydrogen companies have had the best exit compared to any other clean energy sector. So I think that's the one area of focus. The other area of focus is bringing large amounts of capital into the space. So infrastructure capital, which again today, because of the early stage nature of the sector, views this sector to be risky. And a lot of times people don't fully understand the sector very well, so the risk profile goes up even further. And our view is to educate some of these institutional investors to bring the cost of financing down, and then at the same time demonstrate some projects that can further decrease the cost of capital.
Short last question. Where do you think we will be in 2 years from now?
Well, 2 years from now, we will be talking just like how solar was in 2007, just before the financial crisis, where everyone was rushing to do large projects. I think that's what's going to happen with green hydrogen, particularly in the US and some parts of the world where, solar ITC tax credits, for example, or, in some cases, wind and solar incentives have gone away. We will have a much better policy regime for hydrogen. Developers would have fully understood, how to develop a hydrogen project, what the risks are, how safe it is, etc. And I think you will have today, for example, if you think about the number of project announcements in the hydrogen space, you see quite a few projects being announced, but I think the pace of new announcements in the upcoming 2 years will be 10x more in our view.
Wow. Okay. Thank you very much for your contribution, Vishal. And I look forward to hearing more during the presentation on the Green Hydrogen Future virtual event.
Likewise, Edwin. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.